They say time heals all wounds, but what if the wound never stops bleeding? What if, every time you close your eyes, you're dragged back into the same moment, a moment so raw, so final, that even 5 years behind steel bars can't bury it? That's the prison Ethan Carter truly lived in. The day Ethan was released, the sun was blinding. It burned his skin like punishment, like it was mocking him for being allowed to walk free again. He stepped out of Iron Ridge Correctional Facility not with hope, but with something heavier, a grief that refused to die, a question that refused to be answered. Did I kill her? Kate Aldridge, the name alone could knock the wind out of him. He didn't go home that day, no welcome party, no fresh clothes, no celebration. Just a bus ticket he never used and a photograph he couldn't look at, a photo of her, smiling, eyes full of life, the kind of life he had taken. Or so he thought. Instead, Ethan walked. Not toward his future, but toward the past, to the one place he had been both dreading and craving for 5 endless years. Her grave, the cemetery, was nearly empty, the kind of quiet that presses on your chest like a stone. Rows of headstones stretched like memories too stubborn to die. He found it, her name carved into weathered granite, Kate Marie Aldridge, beloved daughter forever missed. The sight knocked him to his knees. He reached out to touch the headstone, his hand trembling, but then he froze. It wasn't the chill of the wind or the sob rising in his throat that stopped him, it was the date. Something was wrong. Ethan stared at the inscription, the birth year etched into the stone. September 21st, 1994. But no, that wasn't right. Kate was born in 1991. He remembered celebrating her 23rd birthday just weeks before the accident. He remembered the cake, the candles, her laughter echoing through their tiny apartment. And suddenly the entire world tilted. 5 years of nightmares began to scream louder. He stumbled back, heart thundering in his chest. Was it a mistake, a typo, or something far worse? That night, he didn't sleep. Again, he never really did. Because for 5 years, every time he closed his eyes, she came for him. In his dreams, he and Kate walked through a field of white daisies, sunlight spilling through the air like honey. She laughed, spun, and ran. Catch me. She called out, her voice light, teasing, filled with that glow that once lit his whole world. He chased her, the daisies brushing his knees, and for a moment, he could almost believe she was real again, but then the dream always turned. The field blurred, her figure dimmed. She started to fade into the light. Kate, he would scream. She'd turn to him, just once, say something he could never quite hear, and vanish. Always the same, always out of reach, always ending in that same scream. Ethan would wake up drenched in sweat, fists clenched so tightly that his palms bled, jaw aching from grinding his teeth in sleep. Every single time, it hit him like a new wound, fresh, sharp, and unforgiving. That's the kind of guilt that doesn't give you space to breathe. He remembered standing in court, the judge's voice flat, calling it a tragic accident. 5 years. Just 5, like it was enough. He had stood there, tears breaking down his face, and begged for more. Give me life, he said. I don't deserve mercy. I took away her future, but the judge didn't see it that way. The system didn't care about his grief, only his lack of intent. No malice, no plan, just recklessness. Just one wrong moment. But what if the moment wasn't his? What if Kate wasn't dead? What if he had spent 5 years in hell for a lie? That question, that crack in the story, started with a date carved in stone. A detail small enough to ignore, but loud enough to echo. And once Ethan noticed it, he couldn't unsee it. The guilt that once chained him began to feel different, not lighter, but suspicious. Like a fog lifting, revealing something sinister underneath. You see, in my years counseling couples, I've learned one thing: the worst betrayals are never loud. They don't come with slamming doors or shouted arguments. They come quiet, in lies buried under comfort. In silences so perfect you almost mistake them for peace. That's how this story begins, not with forgiveness, but with doubt. Not with healing, but with a whisper from the grave. Ethan didn't walk away from that cemetery with closure. He walked away with a question that would unravel everything he thought he knew. Because if Kate wasn't in that grave ... then where the hell was she? And more importantly, why did she let him rot in prison, believing she was dead? This isn't just a story of love lost. It's a story of truth buried, of guilt weaponized, and of a man who's about to dig deeper than any grave until he finds the answer. If this opening gripped you the way it gripped Ethan's soul, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us bring these powerful stories to life, and trust me, what comes next will leave you breathless. Now here's a question for you, and I want you to really think about this before you answer in the comments. If someone you loved let you take the fall for something they did, would you? Forgive them. If they said they were desperate and scared, expose the truth, even if it meant destroying everything they had. Comment your answer below, or and tell us why. We're listening. They met on an ordinary Tuesday. Ethan Carter had just finished his third back-to-back training session at the neighborhood gym in downtown Portland. His shirt clung to his frame with sweat, his hands calloused from years of lifting, coaching, adjusting machines. He wasn't supposed to work the desk that day, but the receptionist called in sick. That's when she walked in. Kate Aldridge didn't belong in that gym. She belonged in a high-rise law firm or some sleek wine bar in the Pearl District, sipping something expensive. But there she was, black leggings, designer jacket, hesitant smile as if unsure whether she was walking into a gym or into someone else's life. And just like that, she stepped into his. She was looking for a trainer. Not to lose weight, not to impress anyone, just because, she said, it was trendy. The honesty disarmed him. Most clients brought in magazines, insecurities, or filtered expectations. Kate brought truth and laughter. That first session didn't amount to much physically, but something about the way she listened, the way she laughed at his dry jokes, the way she tried and failed to master basic form on the leg press, it all lingered. Ethan had trained hundreds of clients over the years, but with her, it didn't feel like work. He would later describe it to friends as magnetic. Not in the cliched sense of chemistry or lust, but something more ancient, like a thread between two souls that had been waiting to find one another again. Within weeks, their sessions turned into conversations. Conversations turned into coffee. Coffee turned into weekends. They talked about everything: her law school workload, her dreams of practicing constitutional law, his past as a collegiate athlete, the heartbreak of a heart condition that cut his weightlifting career short just before nationals. Kate listened like few ever did. Ethan spoke like he hadn't in years. She told him about her family: father a shipping magnate, mother a renowned cardiologist, their dinner parties more political than parental. She didn't romanticize it. There was pride, but also restraint, the quiet pain of always being the daughter of rather than just Kate. He, in contrast, had grown up in rural Washington. His mother tended a vegetable farm. His father repaired tractors and made jokes that never landed. They didn't have much, but they had each other. When he told Kate about the cramped kitchen table where they ate homemade soup every night, her eyes lit up. "That's what real life sounds like," she whispered once. They came from two different worlds, but not in the way that breaks couples. No, this was the kind of difference that stretched them, expanded their views, made them sharper. They filled in each other's gaps. She brought elegance to his discipline. He brought grounding to her ambition. It wasn't without its cracks. The first time he met her parents, he wore his best blazer, the one he only brought out for weddings and the occasional funeral. It didn't matter. Irene Aldridge's gaze cut through him like a scalpel. Graham, her father, barely offered a handshake. They weren't loud about their disapproval, but their silence thundered in the room. Later, Ethan asked her, "Do you think they'll ever accept me?" Kate just smiled, soft but sure. "I'm not asking them to." When she moved into his small apartment the next week, carrying nothing but a suitcase and a duffel bag of law books, Ethan knew something irreversible had happened. He had someone now. Someone who chose him, not out of desperation or lack of options, but out of love, and he was all in. He took on extra clients, saved every cent. He stopped going out with friends, skipped his own birthday dinner to pick up a last-minute shift. Every rep he demonstrated, every meal prep plan he made for someone else's fitness goal, it all fed one: build a life that Kate could be proud of. She didn't ask for any of it, but he gave it willingly. Their love was quiet, but powerful. Like a river, it didn't shout, it carried. They spent Sundays doing meal preps together, listened to audiobooks in bed, argued about which color to paint the kitchen cabinets. They were building something, slowly but surely, brick by emotional brick. One weekend, he took her to visit his parents. He was nervous. His home wasn't polished. No imported wines, no original art, just warmth, just realness. His mother cooked like she was feeding the entire village. His father pulled out the family photo albums and even fired up the old sauna in the backyard, a Finnish tradition passed down generations. Kate tried. You could see it in her eyes, the way she tilted her head and asked questions about the vegetable patch. But she was out of place, not in an arrogant way, just in a quietly overwhelmed way. She didn't understand why the neighbors' geese were allowed to roam free, or why people left their doors unlocked at night. It's charming, she said, but also intense. Ethan laughed. That's just the cows. Wait until the town fair. That weekend was the first time he wondered, could she really live in both worlds forever? Could she ever learn to love the slower rhythms of the life he came from? She said yes when he proposed, no hesitation, no second guessing. He saved for months, picking out a modest ring, unsure if it would be enough. But when he knelt down, her hands flew to her face. Ethan, she whispered, 1,000 times yes. They didn't talk about a wedding date. There wasn't time. She was in her final semester. He was hustling overtime to put together a down payment for a better place. Their dreams weren't just castles in the sky. They were blueprints, real, tangible. But if there's one thing I've learned after years of helping couples fight for their love, it's this. Love doesn't break because of a lack of effort. It breaks because of impact, sudden, sharp, like glass shattering when no one saw the storm coming. Their storm arrived on the return drive from his hometown. A twist of fate, a car they never saw coming. A scream, then silence. What followed was darkness, blood, and silence. And what Ethan woke up to, days later, was a world without Kate. Or so he believed. Before betrayal has a name, it starts as absence. And in Ethan's case, it started with a ring still on his finger and an empty space where her voice should have been. But here's the thing about love built on truth: it doesn't die easily. And sometimes, even in the face of betrayal, the past refuses to let go until it's reckoned with. Ethan didn't know it then, but the real story, the real storm, was only just beginning. It was supposed to be a quiet drive home. The sky had turned a warm shade of gold as the sun slipped behind the hills, painting the highway in strokes of orange and fading blue. Ethan Carter and Kate Aldridge had just spent the weekend in his hometown, visiting his parents. And sometimes, even in the face of betrayal, the past refuses to let go until it's reckoned with. Ethan didn't know it then, but the real story, the real storm, was only just beginning. It was supposed to be a quiet drive home. The sky had turned a warm shade of gold as the sun slipped behind the hills, painting the highway in strokes of orange and fading blue. Ethan Carter and Kate Aldridge had just spent the weekend in his hometown, visiting his parents, flipping through photos on her phone, smiling to herself. Ethan's hand rested on the gearshift, occasionally brushing against hers. Music played low in the background, some old indie playlist she loved. Everything felt okay. Then it happened. It wasn't dramatic at first, just headlights, to fast, to close. A black SUV came out of nowhere, swerving into their lane like a predator cutting off its prey. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He jerked the wheel hard to the right, trying to avoid a collision, but the car lost traction. The sound of tires screaming against asphalt was deafening. Then the world turned sideways, metal crumpled, glass shattered. Kate screamed. That part never left him, and then, silence. When Ethan opened his eyes, the world was still. He was upside down, blood trickled down his temple. He couldn't move his left arm. The smell of gasoline, scorched plastic, and something sharp and metallic filled his lungs. Kate, he turned, panicked. Her seat was empty. The passenger door was ajar, hanging off its hinge. She was gone. Then he blacked out. When he came to again, it wasn't in a hospital bed, not yet. It was for a brief moment, just long enough to hear voices outside the car, muffled, urgent. One voice stood out. A man's voice, stern, familiar. "Kate, are you hurt? Are you okay, Dad?" Even through the fog of pain, Ethan's mind clung to that word, Dad. He remembered flashes, Kate crying, her father's voice tight with fear, and then darkness again. The next time he awoke, he was in a hospital room, with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and a tube in his arm. A nurse hovered nearby, adjusting machines. When he asked about Kate, her expression shifted. She didn't answer, just told him to rest. Hours passed. A doctor came in, checked his vitals, asked a few questions. Ethan asked again, "Where is Kate?" Silence. It wasn't until an investigator arrived that he learned the truth. Or what they wanted him to believe was the truth. "Mr. Carter," the man said, tone grim and rehearsed. "I'm sorry to inform you, Kate Aldridge didn't survive the crash." Ethan's world collapsed in that instant. "No," he said, his voice cracking. "That's not possible. She was just here. I saw her. She was okay. I understand this is difficult," the investigator said. "But the evidence is clear. She died on impact. Your vehicle was traveling above the recommended speed for that section of the road. Preliminary analysis suggests driver error." Ethan tried to protest, to explain about the SUV, the swerve, the sudden cutoff. Ethan's world collapsed in that instant. "No," he said, his voice cracking. "That's not possible. She was just here. I saw her. She was okay. I understand this is difficult," the investigator said. "But the evidence is clear. She died on impact. Your vehicle was traveling above the recommended speed for that section of the road. Preliminary analysis suggests driver error." Ethan tried to protest, to explain about the SUV, the swerve, the sudden cutoff. No drugs, no alcohol, but recklessness nonetheless. They called it a tragic mistake. They gave him 5 years. What no one knew, what Ethan himself didn't know at the time, was that the real story had been buried at the scene of the crash. Because Kate wasn't dead, she had walked away from the accident, bruised but alive. And her father, Graham Aldridge, had wasted no time in taking control of the situation. Graham wasn't just a father, he was a man of power, influence, reputation. He couldn't risk a scandal, especially not one involving his mistress. Because that SUV Ethan had swerved to avoid, it was Graham's. And the woman in the passenger seat wasn't his wife. Catalina was younger, reckless, unpredictable. She had been high that night, emotional, angry. According to Kate, as she would one day confess, Catalina had grabbed the steering wheel during an argument, causing Graham to lose control and veer into Ethan's lane. Catalina died on impact. And Graham, desperate and terrified, knew what he had to do. He staged the scene, arranged the evidence, pulled strings with police, planted stories, paid for silence. He convinced Kate, panicked, in shock, to disappear, to let Ethan take the fall. "He's strong," Graham told her. "He can survive this. But if this gets out, it will destroy us all." Kate didn't agree right away, but trauma is a powerful silencer. And daughters, no matter how strong, often fold under the weight of their father's fear, so Kate vanished. And Ethan was left to carry the burden of a crime he didn't commit, the guilt of a death that never happened, and the sentence of a man who had loved too blindly. What happened that night wasn't just a car crash. It was the collision of truth and power, love and manipulation. It was the moment a good man's life derailed not because he made a mistake, but because someone else couldn't face the consequences of their own. And the cruelest part, Ethan would spend years haunted by grief for a woman who still breathed. Grieving a grave that didn't hold her. Apologizing to a ghost that wasn't one, until the lie started to unravel. Until one small inconsistency, a date, a name, a look, whispered, "Look again." And when the truth finally surfaced, it wouldn't just shatter Ethan's world. It would expose a legacy built on deception and a love that, for all its beauty, had been buried alive. Some truths don't scream when they come to light. They whisper quiet, insistent, crawling under your skin until you can no longer sleep, no longer breathe without questioning everything you believed. For Ethan Carter, that whisper came in the form of a child's laughter. It had been a week since he'd stood at the false grave. A week since he saw the wrong birth date chiseled into cold granite. At first, he wanted to believe it was a typo, an oversight, a clerical mistake in a world that never cared enough to get the details right. But that theory crumbled with each sleepless night. Something didn't sit right. A small, trembling doubt had taken root and it was growing fast. He started to search, not out of hope, but out of something darker, obsession. Because what do you do when the person you loved most, someone you believed was dead, might still be alive? You dig, even if it means unearthing things that were buried for a reason. He began quietly, hospital records, news reports. Old acquaintances from law school. Her mother had died years ago, and Ethan hadn't heard from her extended family since the funeral. But Graham Aldridge, he was still out there, powerful, unreachable, untouchable. Ethan knew better than to go straight to the lion's den. Instead, he looked sideways. He tracked down a former family driver, now retired and bitter. A woman who once worked as Kate's personal assistant. He made calls under fake names, asked questions disguised as curiosity. And that's when the first thread loosened. Graham left the city around the time of the accident, the assistant recalled, said it was for grief. But then, strangest thing I heard, he bought a private property in Crescent Bay. Crescent Bay, a sleepy coastal town 2 hours south, tucked between cliffs and sea, quiet enough to disappear in. He drove there on instinct, no plan, no expectation. Just a pulse in his chest that hadn't stopped pounding since he left prison. He arrived just before dusk. The air smelled of salt and pine. There was a quiet estate on the edge of a hill, modern architecture, tall hedges, tinted windows. The kind of place designed not to be seen, and then it happened. He had parked across the street, pretending to check a map, when the front gate slid open, a sleek car pulled in. From behind the wheel stepped a woman, tall, slender, with long auburn hair tied back in a loose braid. Her posture, her walk. Every nerve in his body stood on edge. It couldn't be. But then came the sound that tore the ground from beneath him, a child's voice. "Mommy, wait for me." A small boy, no older than 4, came running from the garden, arms outstretched. The woman turned, bent down, lifted him. Ethan's vision narrowed. His breath caught in his throat. It was her Kate, alive, breathing, smiling, holding a child that looked unmistakably like him. The world tilted for a moment. He forgot how to move. His fingers trembled against the steering wheel. Rage and relief, betrayal and awe collided inside him all at once. He had buried her. He had served 5 years in a cell grieving her. And yet here she was, whole, radiant, carrying on a life that had moved forward while he stood still, and the boy ... his son. The thought hit him like a punch to the chest. The child's eyes, those were Ethan's, the shape of his jaw. The slight curl in his hair, there was no mistaking it. Kate hadn't just disappeared, she had chosen silence. She had chosen to raise a child alone rather than come forward. She had let him take the fall, carry the guilt, rot in a prison cell thinking he'd killed her. And now she was here, living in a house bought with her father's money, shielded from the consequences of a truth they had buried together. Ethan didn't confront her, not yet. He couldn't. He drove away that night, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, heart in freefall. Every part of him screamed for answers, screamed to run back and demand she look him in the eye and tell him why. But he needed time, because this wasn't just about pain anymore. It was about justice, for him, for the years lost, for the love betrayed, and maybe, just maybe, for the little boy who deserved to know the truth. In my years of helping couples navigate infidelity, abandonment, or long-standing deception, I've seen every kind of heartbreak. But this was something else entirely. This wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. To grieve someone while they live, to wear sorrow like second skin while they wake to birdsong and bedtime stories, that's a wound so deep, no words can dress it. Ethan had loved her with everything he had believed in her goodness. And now he had to wrestle with the fact that the woman he once trusted more than himself had vanished into comfort while he suffered in silence. But something had shifted. He was no longer the man who fell to his knees at a gravesite. He was the man who would demand truth no matter how devastating it might be. And the next time he looked into her eyes, she would have to choose confession or consequence. There are betrayals that scream in the moment, loud and hot and violent. But then there are betrayals that unfold quietly, over time, like a slow unraveling. The kind you only begin to understand years later, when the damage has already been done, when the blood has already dried and the silence has already settled. Ethan Carter lived through the second kind. He didn't sleep the night he saw her, Kate, alive, holding a child who looked unmistakably like him. He didn't eat the next day, nor the one after that. There was a war inside him, between the man who wanted to storm her door and demand answers, and the man who needed the full truth, not just her words, but the pieces behind them, the choices that led to this moment. He returned to Crescent Bay 2 days later. This time, he didn't park across the street. He walked straight to the front door of the house perched on the cliffside. His knuckles hesitated only for a second before knocking. The sound echoed like a gavel in a courtroom. The door opened, and there she was, Kate. No disguise, no hesitation. Her face froze, not in surprise, but in the kind of knowing that comes when secrets you've buried too deep finally claw their way to the surface. "Ethan," she whispered. One hand clutched the doorframe. The other trembled slightly at her side. He didn't speak. Just looked at her, eyes heavy with 5 years of silence, of grief, of unasked questions. She stepped back. "Come in." The house was modern and minimal, but it smelled like something lived in: warm food, soft laundry, a child's laughter lingering in the air. There were toys on the rug, crayons scattered across a kitchen counter, photos on the wall, and one, tucked in the corner, almost hidden behind a curtain, Kate, smiling, holding the boy in her lap. The boy, his son. Ethan couldn't look away. She poured tea, a nervous habit, perhaps, or maybe a desperate attempt at pretending this was normal, that two people who'd once sworn their lives to each other weren't now standing on opposite sides of a battlefield. "I thought I saw a ghost," he finally said, "but ghosts don't have children." Kate closed her eyes. "I wanted to tell you." "When?" "Before or after the funeral you let them fake." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know what to do. I wasn't thinking clearly. You had 5 years." A silence between them stretched, tense, brittle. Then she spoke, quietly. "The night of the accident, my father pulled me from the car. I was hurt, but not badly. You were unconscious. And then I saw Catalina. She was already gone." My father panicked. "He kept saying it was your fault, that he'd fix everything, that no one needed to know the truth. He said if it all came out, he'd lose everything: his company, his name, maybe even his freedom." "And you believed him?" "I was terrified, Ethan. I had blood on my hands. I was pregnant, though I didn't know it yet. And my father, he made it all sound like there was no choice. If I told the truth, he said you'd still go to prison, but this way, at least I'd be safe. The baby would be safe." Ethan stared at her. "You let me rot in a cell. You let me believe I killed you." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I told myself every day I would come forward, that I'd fix it. But then time passed, and it got harder. I kept waiting for the right moment. But the truth is, I was afraid, not just of my father but of you. Of what you'd think of me." He swallowed hard. "You thought I'd hate you?" "Yes," Ethan exhaled slowly. "You're right." That landed between them like a final verdict. "I loved you more than anything," he said. "I would have taken on anything for you. And I did, but this wasn't love. This was survival at my expense." Kate looked down. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness." He stepped closer. "That's not what I'm offering. What I want is truth, all of it. I want to know who forged the death certificate, who silenced the police, who paid off the hospital staff. Because I'm not leaving until I clear my name, and I swear to you, Kate, if I have to burn your father's empire to the ground to do it, I will." Her chin lifted. There was fear in her eyes, but also something else. Resolution, a glimmer of the woman he once loved. "I'll help you," she said. "I'll testify. I'll tell them everything." Ethan looked at her. For a long time, he wanted to believe her. But trust wasn't a switch you could flip. It was something earned, over time, and she had spent 5 years burying it. Still, she was the key. And maybe, just maybe, their son deserved parents who could stand in the light, even if they came there from the shadows. As Ethan left the house that night, the wind picked up along the cliffside, salty and sharp. The past had cracked wide open. The truth was no longer hidden. But healing, that would take longer, because sometimes the most painful kind of betrayal is not when someone lies to you. It's when they let you suffer in the name of love. And sometimes the hardest truth to face is that real love cannot live in silence. It must speak, even if the voice trembles, even if the words come too late. Ethan knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of justice, of healing. And maybe, just maybe, redemption. In the end, Ethan's story is not just a tale of betrayal or of a love that was shattered and buried beneath 5 years of silence. It is, more profoundly, a mirror held up to the human soul, to our fears, our choices, and the invisible weight of the consequences we carry. What makes this story haunting is not only what was done to Ethan, but the silence that followed, the silence of a woman too afraid to speak. The silence of a father desperate to protect his image. The silence of a system willing to sacrifice truth for convenience. But Ethan, broken, grieving, exiled from the life he built, never let that silence define him. His pain did not harden him into bitterness. Instead, it sharpened his instinct, deepened his character, and called him to act. That is what resilience looks like. Not absence of pain, but the refusal to let pain dictate your destiny. Many of us will never stand in Ethan's shoes. We may never be falsely imprisoned. We may never be betrayed by someone we would have died for. But all of us, at some point, will experience a fracture of trust. A moment when someone we believed in fails us, when life does not go as planned. When silence feels like the only safe place to hide. What Ethan's story teaches us is that the truth always survives. It may be buried, ignored, even feared, but it endures. And when we find the courage to face it, we open the door to healing, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. Ethan did not seek revenge. He sought understanding, he demanded honesty. He wanted to reclaim not just his name, but the meaning of his life, stolen in a single night and hidden in plain sight. This story also reminds us that the choices we make in fear can echo far beyond the moment. Kate's silence didn't just protect her father. It sentenced the man she loved to years of anguish. Every time we choose comfort over truth, we plant seeds of harm that may take years to bloom. But just as mistakes can grow, so can redemption, if we are willing to confront, confess, and take responsibility. So what's the lesson here, really? It is this: speak your truth, even if your voice trembles. Choose what is right, even if it costs you. And never let silence be the reason someone you love suffers in the dark. In a world that rewards appearances, Ethan's journey reminds us that integrity, even when it is bruised and bleeding, is still the strongest foundation we can stand on. How can you apply this to your life today? If you're carrying a secret, a regret, or a truth you've been too afraid to speak, start small, speak it to yourself, journal it. Whisper it in prayer, then, when you're ready, speak it to the person who needs to hear it. Don't wait until time has made liars of us all. Don't wait until silence becomes betrayal. And if you've been wronged deeply, give yourself the grace to feel. You don't have to forgive before you're ready, but don't let pain become your identity. Like Ethan, let it shape you, not define you. Let it lead you back to your own power. The truth will cost you something. But silence will cost you everything. Question for you: if you had to choose between protecting someone you love or telling the truth that could hurt them, what would you do? Tell the truth, even if it causes pain. Protect them, even if it means staying silent. Please comment your answer below, and feel free to explain your perspective. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and your experience might help someone else who's going through something similar. If this story touched you, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps me continue creating meaningful, thought-provoking content like this. And if you feel moved to support this work, you can donate. Any amount, big or small, truly makes a difference. I'm no longer young, but I still believe in using the time I have left to do something good for others. Your support reminds me that these efforts matter. Thank you for being here, thank you for listening. And above all, thank you for choosing truth in your life and in your heart.